But first, we begin in Washington, where CNN White House correspondent Jim Acosta has won the first round of his battle to cover the president. A judge has ordered the Trump administration give back his press pass, at least for now.
I want to thank all of my colleagues in the press who supported us this week, and I want to thank the judge for the decision he made today. And let's go back to work.
It all stems from this White House news conference last week following the midterm elections, when Trump tried to evade Acosta's questions. An intern moved to take his microphone away. Acosta tried to hang onto the mic, and he was accused of making contact with the intern. The White House pulled Acosta's press credentials a few hours later. So now Acosta is heading back to the White House, where there's already been some testy reaction. The CBC's Ellen Morrow is watching this, and she joins me now live. So Ellen, tell us more about the ruling and what CNN is saying about it.
Well, Andrew, this ruling, as you said, happened a few hours ago. Jim Acosta is now back at work at the White House. He was greeted by a lot of cameras as he made his arrival there this afternoon. Now, going back to the ruling this morning, CNN made a case on the First and the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment aspect is what the judge ruled on today, essentially saying that the White House did not give Acosta due process in revoking his press pass, which allows reporters to go in and out of the White House and be able to roam around in certain areas on the White House grounds. So on that Fifth Amendment basis, not ruling on the First Amendment, the judge said the White House had to give back Acosta's press pass. The judge also weighed in on whether or not the White House claimed that Acosta touched the intern, saying that that was very likely untrue. And as you heard from Jim Acosta there, he had a very happy reaction this morning, as did CNN's lawyer Ted Boutros. Have a listen.
We're extremely pleased with the ruling today. This is a great day for the First Amendment in journalism. We're very excited to have Mr. Acosta be able to go back and get his hard pass and report the news.
Now, Andrew, this is a temporary ruling because there is the larger issue, the First Amendment issue, that will be ruled on in the coming weeks and months. So the story not going away just yet, even though Jim Acosta back on the White House grounds reporting.
And Ellen, recently we have heard from Donald Trump, the U.S. president, about this.
That's right. President Trump spoke about this a short time ago, his reaction to the ruling and what needs to happen at White House press conferences. Here's what the president had to say.
No, just people have to behave, and they have to do, we're writing up rules and regulations to make our position. I think you were treated very unfairly, both of you. I think you were treated very unfairly because you have somebody interrupting you. And if they don't listen to the rules and regulations, we'll end up back in court and we'll win. But more importantly, we'll just leave, and then you won't be very happy. Because we do get good ratings. Decorum. You can't take 3 questions and 4 questions and just stand up and not sit down. Decorum. You have to practice decorum. You were there, you understood, and you understand. We want total freedom of the press. That's very important to me. It's more important to me than anybody would believe. But you have to act with respect. You're in the White House, and when I see the way some of my people get treated at press conferences, it's terrible. So we're setting up a certain standard, which is what the court is requesting.
Now, you heard President Trump there, Andrew, use the word decorum. That is a basis of part of the White House's argument, saying that the way Jim Acosta acted at this press conference, not giving back the microphone, for example, that he was not acting with decorum. Now, that's the White House side of this, but you have to remember at that same press conference, the president called Jim Acosta a terrible, rude person. He told another reporter that her question was racist. In the past, a few days after that press conference, he told another reporter that her question was stupid. So there is a question, you know, where does the decorum start? From the bottom, the reporters, or from the top, the president and his aides?
And referring to CNN and some media outlets as the enemy of the people in that press conference as well. So it'll certainly be interesting to follow this story moving forward. Ellen, thank you. The CBC's Ellen Morrow live in Washington. For more on the judge's ruling, I'm joined by media lawyer Edward Claris in New York. He's a past counsel for The New Yorker magazine and for ABC News. He's now a managing partner and CEO of Claris Law. So, Edward, first of all, what was your reaction? Because there were 2 issues that were challenged here by CNN. So what was your reaction to this ruling?
Well, you're right. Hi, Andrew. There were two issues. There's a First Amendment question and a Fifth Amendment question around the constitutionality of revoking the press passes from Jim Acosta. The judge very specifically narrowed his decision to the Fifth Amendment, due process. He said that the White House had not conducted themselves appropriately. They had not given Jim Acosta an opportunity to be heard. They had withdrawn his press passes without any basis through Twitter and through a relatively arbitrary and capricious process. He's now sent the case. He's now ordered the White House to reissue the press pass and to be able to keep Acosta working while the White House is now being asked to come up with certain restrictions and rules and regulations for how the press can conduct themselves in the White House.
So, and we'll get to that in a second, but this is a win, obviously, for CNN's Jim Acosta. But do you think revoking Acosta's White House press credentials was fair in the first place?
Absolutely not, Andrew. This was both a violation of his First Amendment rights and his Fifth Amendment rights. The court didn't get to the main issue of the First Amendment. They just focused on due process, but it is clear from both U.S. precedent and U.S. constitutional law that once you make the White House available to the press and you issue press credentials pursuant to a procedure, you can't exclude somebody like Jim Acosta merely because you're unhappy with the way he conducted himself in the press room, even if you think what he did was rude.
Okay, well, it's interesting you say that because the president seems to think that there needs to be decorum. This is the kind of language we heard from the press secretary. We also heard from Donald Trump a short time ago. Let's listen to a clip of what he had to say about new rules or new decorum that he thinks there needs to be in these press conferences.
No, just people have to behave, and they have to do. We're writing up rules and regulations to make our position. I think you were treated very unfairly, both of you. I think you were treated very unfairly because you have somebody interrupting you, and if they don't listen to the rules and regulations, we'll end up back in court and we'll win. But more importantly, we'll just leave, and then you won't be very happy. Because we do get good ratings. Decorum. You can't take 3 questions and 4 questions and just stand up and not sit down. Decorum. You have to practice decorum. You were there, you understood, and you understand. We want total freedom of the press. That's very important to me. It's more important to me than anybody would believe. But you have to act with respect. You're in the White House, and when I see the way some of my people get treated at press conferences, it's terrible. So we're setting up a certain standard, which is what the court is requesting.
So, Edward, what's your reaction to what Trump said about all that?
You know, I think that President Trump is getting the message. I think he's understanding now that he didn't have neutrally applied rules. There is such thing as time, place, and manner rules that do govern First Amendment activity. He's now recognizing that he does need to set up those rules and he needs to apply them neutrally. And if he does, you know, the truth is he probably will be okay having rules such as you can't be disruptive and you've got to follow a certain set of rules of decorum. If he starts to apply those rules in a content-based way where he tries to use them against, say, CNN and not against news networks that he's more comfortable with, then that will be a First Amendment violation as well. But if he applies them neutrally and they are a rational set of rules, then I don't think that President Trump will have a problem.
But there does seem to be, you know, it seems to be, some would suggest that he's being hypocritical because he doesn't always uphold decorum in these press conferences. You know, he'll call a reporter racist. He'll call the press the enemy of the people. He berates the press. He tells them to sit down if he doesn't want to hear from them or he didn't call upon them. I mean, is he upholding decorum at these press conferences?
That's a good question. And you're right. The kind of vitriol, the kind of emotionalism, the way in which the President Trump communicates through Twitter is inappropriate. It doesn't have the kind of decorum that one would expect of a president, of really anybody. However, he is the president, it is the White House, and if there are neutrally applied rules of the manner in which you should conduct yourself, then that will be reviewed and determined whether or not it fits within the narrowly defined definition of a time, place, and manner restriction. And, it'll probably be applied. He can set the rules in some ways in the White House as long as it's neutral.
But I just wonder whether it would be neutral, because, there have been reporters that sometimes are assertive in their questioning. When there aren't answers to their questions, they may interrupt because they know that there is a limited amount of time at these press conferences when they get the chance to ask the president questions. So I'm wondering if this decorum is going to be used in a way to stop reporters from doing their job, which is sometimes to be assertive, sometimes to yell out questions.
You're absolutely right. And the press needs to be able to be unfettered and have breathing room. On the other hand, the president can decide who he's interviewed by. He can decide who gets called on. He has control of that room. And I don't think that there's any press organization that will argue that, they can't talk out of turn. If somebody's called on, then that person gets heard. It is an unfortunate situation where the president could wall himself off more and more from those who might not disagree with him. But he is given a lot of discretion as long as it's applied neutrally. And that's where I think CNN is going to be watching really closely. Because so far, neutrality and even-handedness is not the hallmark of President Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he said, and if you don't behave, we'll just leave. We just won't be there. We won't answer your questions. I mean, I guess I know I keep coming back to this, but it just feels as though his reaction could have a chilling effect on White House reporters.
You're absolutely right. And I think that there is, not just in this context, but in many contexts, President Trump has issued statements that can be viewed as chilling. He's undermining the press's credibility by continuously calling them fake news. And there is a concerted effort to make the press not believable so that those who follow him in his Twitter and his direct relations believe merely Donald Trump. And that is really concerning. That's where propaganda gets to be dangerous. And so we can only hope that the alternative press, the press that actually is looking for the facts and that is not fake news, which I really don't think there's really any fake news out there in the mainstream media, gets a turn to talk to the president and ask him the difficult questions. And I do hope that President Trump understands that and appreciates it.
All right, Edward, always appreciate your insight. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here, Andrew. Thank you.
That was Edward Claris in New York.